And the training I wanted to go over today is, are you in the game? And we'll make the distinction really clear in this training. Like, what does it mean in the game? Like, what does it mean to be in the game? What does it mean to be out of the game? And I want to set you up, want to set your listening up in a way that this directly applies to you. So you'd be looking directly at the areas of your life that we'll be talking about, the topics that directly impact you, that you would actually apply this training somehow before we even had it, that you would get really engaged in this time that you have with us and with me around being in the game rather than being somewhere else other than here while you're watching it. And while we do that, we'll make the distinctions around how you're showing up around this is likely how you show up everywhere else as well. So there's lots of games that we play. And in most games we play, there are multiple views the game is being played from. So for example, there are the people actually playing the game. So whatever it is you like, we all have some game that we're more familiar with than another, or maybe some game that we played, in high school or in college or professionally, or we have our local teams that we know about that we follow. But regardless of what it is, there's always the people playing, right? The people out in the field or out in the rink. And there are also the people spectating. I don't know if there's ever been a person that I've met at this age in my life that hasn't been a spectator at some point in some game, where you're the person in the stand, or you're the parent watching the child, or you've been asked to, be in front of the TV during the Super Bowl. We would consider all those things being a spectator in the game. Now, there's also some other unique roles that we're not going to go into a lot in this training, but I think it's helpful to identify that these roles do exist. And one is coaches. We have coaches in the game where they're not really playing in the game and they're also not spectating. They have this really unique role where they interact with the actual players. And then we also have player assistants. Depending on like how professional it is or what type of game it is, you'll have someone who assists the players in one way or another. But they're not playing and they're also not spectating. Like there's this balance. So where you show up in the game significantly changes your ability to have impact in the actual results. So where you show up in the game is going to have large impact in how the results of the game actually show up for you. Right? Like if you're in the stands, like cheering and being loud and maybe throwing out like, certain things to certain players might have some impact, but does it actually impact the game as much as the people playing the game? Or if you're a coach or if you're a player assistant, you can see the different roles really have a different level of impact in the game you're playing. So in the game, what if you thought you were in the game and I was to tell you that you were not? So I'm just going to have you try something on. What if there's been this game you thought you were in the game on, and I was to actually tell you you're not? In a sports game, this seems kind of silly, right? If you're actually playing sports, you'd go, that's ridiculous. Like, it sounds really silly. Imagine you're a football player and I was to tell you that you were not actually in the game when you thought you were. Like, that'd be pretty ridiculous. You'd think you would know. It would almost be ridiculous to consider that circumstance. However, when we're in the game of life, it's a little different. And it actually can get really confusing. We can actually think we're in the game when we're not. So playing in the game, when playing in the game of life, it isn't very easy to think you are in the game when you're actually not. So it's really easy to have this happen, that you might actually think you're in the game and you're not. And what we're going to do, we will take some time to help you identify multiple areas of your life you show up in the stands when you actually think you're in the game. So just to be clear, when I say in the stands, imagine, just like in this image, imagine there's the game happening in the field, and the people in the stands are the people up in the bleachers. So when you hear me reference in the stands, it means you're a spectator up there. You're not actually in the game down there. Okay? If you're not getting long-term results in the game you think you are playing, I would take a look with me to see where you are showing up. So all you'd have to know that would have you really engage at this point to help again set up your listening around this is you could just look at your results in certain areas of your life, and we're going to cover pretty much all of them in this short time that I have with you. We're going to cover all the areas of your life, and I would just look at are you having the results you want? Are there areas where it doesn't come with ease or it's frustrating? And you could just see that as a result, and you can know that there's some area or aspect of that game you're playing that you're actually not in it. You're up in the stands somewhere. So we're going to cover all 4 areas. And the first one we're going to go into is relationships. Because we're in relationship with everyone. And this life is filled with relationships, from your work to your home and your community, right? Your family, your friends. You just have relationships everywhere. It shows up probably every day. And you'll be able to tell when you're in the game in your relationships because you're actually doing something about or for them. So to be in the game in your relationships, you would actually be in the game. You'd actually be doing something in that specific whatever relationship, friendship, they're all relationships, but with a friend, and you wanted to be in the game with that friend, you would know you're in the game because you would be either with them or doing something about it or doing something for them or having some type of interaction. When you're in a conversation about your relationship, where are you? In the game or somewhere else? You ever had a conversation about a relationship? You ever been involved in some conversation about a friend or a significant other or someone from work, a coworker that you're involved with, and you're having a conversation about that relationship? It may not even be a conversation with someone else. It might be the conversation that you're running in your head. Take a look just for a moment and see where you show up not in the game in your relationships. Have you ever been in gossip around someone you are in a relationship with? Now, again, this isn't your significant other or some boyfriend or girlfriend or some spouse. I'm talking about it. For some reason, when we say relationships, we think that. And it's crazy. It's you're in a relationship probably more with other people than you are with your significant other. It's probably more likely and more often with people you work with and with your friends and with your family. You have all these relationships happening. And have you ever been in gossip around one of those people? Or have you ever noticed you avoid certain people? You've been avoiding a person because of a conflict or some issue. It's there's this unmanageable thing. You don't know how to be with that person. It's a coworker or a friend, and something happened, and you don't know how to relate. You don't know how to be with them. So you avoid. Or have you ever related to something involving a relationship you've done it, but not directly? I do this all the time where it's I am okay, I've got this thing that I want to address with this person. I can think of one person in particular that I've been talking about, for the last couple months, and they're not someone I see every day. But there's this thing that's in the middle of our relationship, and he, the way he shows up for me, he doesn't anymore because I've created this thing, and I have these conversations just like now where I talk about him and I talk about maybe this thing I'll do, or I'll run. You ever done this where you like play out the conversation in your head over and over and over and over, like the things you would say and the things they would say back, and you do this thing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All I'm having you look at is that being in the game, or are you being in the stands? You ever notice kind of what the people in the stands do and say? You ever been at a Super Bowl game with a bunch of friends and you start listening to everyone in the room and how they talk, the conversation they're having and involved in? It's really similar, isn't it? It's really similar to like this friend I have that I haven't been talking to because I have this like issue with, and I just have this conversation in my head and I talk about it with others. But guess who I'm actually not being at cause with in that moment? With him. And where could I actually make a difference? Where could I have direct impact in the game of my relationship with him? Over here with you guys talking about it in my head, or with him? Talk about how to be in the game in relationships. So what if we're talking about how to be in the game in relationships? Like, even doing this training does not have me in the game when it comes to relationships. Do you see that? Like, here I am talking about relationships, doing a training, and it's about relationships. And it's like, am I even in the game right now? It's like, no, even talking about it or training on it or being the expert or having these terms that we like, this is not being in the game. This is like that unique role of coaching, but it's still not being in the game. I'm still like this sideline thing that's not happening out there. So are you playing in the game of relationships? What relationships suffer because you are in the stands of your game with them? You may find you talk a lot about this individual, but not with them. This is that thing I just shared around like being in your head around it. You have these conversations in your head, but it will never be that conversation with that person because you're not having it with them. Or you talk to yourself in your head about the conversations you've never had, right? It's the same thing. So the next thing has to do with your wealth. Being in the game with your wealth or money. So where is money? Where are the different games of money being played? I want to talk about this for just a moment, because it's like, are there different games when we're just talking about sports? Like, think of all the different game sports or sport games that exist. And I want to relate that now to money. And think of all the different places where money is being played. And I say played because I want to keep relating to it like it's a game. Where is money? Where is it happening? What games are being played to have it? And if you were to have money, wouldn't you want to play in the game where money is? If you wanted to have money show up for you in a way that was fun and you're winning and there's this thing happening where you're getting the results that you wanted, wouldn't you have to be in the game to have that occur? And can you see how you're not in the game when it comes to money? You might consider these areas, how you balance money. Like this game of like flow, like when it comes in and when it goes out, like the balancing act of money. You might also consider, where do you interact with it? Like, where are the interactions when it comes to money? Like from where you spend it to also where you collect it. And how you handle making it. And how you handle your debt. Like, debt's a big part of this, guys. It has to do with the ebb and flow and the balance part of money. And you might find you're not in the game in any of these areas. Or you might find you're better in the game in certain areas, but not in the other. But just like with relationships, you would know by like, are you just a philosopher when it comes to money? You're the one that gives really great advice around how to get it, but you're never actually in the game around getting it. Or like you're the person that avoids it, and when when the topic comes up, you shut down and you curl up into a ball because it's like, I don't want to deal with it. I have this agreement with money that, if I avoid it, it avoids me, and then everything should work in my life? Or are you actually in the game where winning and losing occurs, and not in the stands watching it, talking about it, having a conversation on the side, cheering for the people who are making it, and making fun of and pointing out the losers who aren't? Do you know how it feels, or do you know what it feels like to be in the game with money? All of us have had an experience around this where it's like you've been in the game with money. It's hard to have lived this many years in your life and not have had to be in the game at some point. For those of you who are in sales or own your own business, you know you are in the game of money when you're making it is the intention behind what you're doing. So you'll know you're in the game when the intention, the thing underneath, is making money. Like, you've heard these trainings that I've done around like filing paper clips, or like productivity versus like activity versus accomplishment. Like, what are you doing? What are you actually doing right now at this moment? And is the intentionality behind it to make money? Like, is that the intention that you're constantly running under, that the foundation is built on? Or is it something else? Is it to be in the stands, to be talking about it, to be watching others do it, to be going, oh, well, good for them. They have a system and a thing that works, but not me. Heaven help if I were to actually like step into that and try that for myself. For those of you employed, working hard and being valuable has you in the game with money. I can think of the times that I was in the game when it came to being employed. And there's nothing more that an employer likes than to know that you're contributing to, again, the intentionality of making money. Like, being employed is about being involved in something that's generating revenue most of the time, almost always. And to be valuable to the place that you're at, having like adding value, like not just like this nice thing that you do, but like real value, like with intentionality of making money. The more you're working hard and developing who you are around that, the more you're in the game. Because what's an employer going to do when they're like, wow, so-and-so just really added all this value to the company, and now the company's generating X more dollars because of this thing? You want to be in the game of money. You want to raise, you want to make more. You'd have to be in the game. But you know the employees that don't do this, don't you? And as employees, you know the co-workers who do this. Like, we're going to go into the stands a little bit for a moment. And we're going to talk and have a conversation out of the game around the people who are in the game. Because you know the people who are in the game, and you know the ones who are in the stands. As an employee, they're doing enough just to get by. They're doing enough just to, make ends meet and not really have their life work, because they're really confused of what it would take to be down there in the field playing the game versus in the stands. Now, this goes into other areas as well, like your health. Like, you can't be in the game of life and not have your health be part of this. It's like it interweaves with all the other parts, all the other games that you could be playing. Can you see how you have been, or how you have and have not been, in the game with your health? Can you take just like a moment and look at like, okay, how have I been in and how have I not been in the game when it comes to my health? And this includes and is definitely not limited to exercise. You could look at that. You could look at what you eat. You could look at your diet, mental state. You could look at like how much rest or sleep do you get. Like, all these things are going to play into like, are you in the game or are you in the stands? And it's not like, how many of you sleep? It's like, well, we all do. Well, yes, I'm in the game. No, it's like, what's the intentionality behind it? That it's about your well-being, that it's about your rest. Or like, how many of you guys are going to eat lunch today? You're like, yes, well, I must be in the game when it comes to my health. No, it's like the people in the stands, they're not in the game. They're not cause in their health around their eating. They just eat whatever, right? There's no intentionality around health and eating. They just have it occur. There's no winning or losing. It just shows up for them. They just let it come in. There's no effort. There's no cause in their health around it. So can you see how much you may think you're in the game of your health, but you're actually not? Like, you talk about it, oh my gosh. It's almost scary. Like, we'll get in these conversations around diet. You ever done that? You ask someone like, hey, I'm thinking about starting this diet. And the next thing you know, there's like 4 people that have something to say around it. And you can just look and that like these are all just spectators. Like, none of them are actually in the game. Half of them, like, they're not like, well, this is what I do. But somehow they have advice for you around, how it would be to be in the game around your health. Or exercise, that's the best. Someone like has this workout routine, and they're going to tell you about it because they tried it once, because you're going to start exercising again. And like, you can see how even in that moment, you could look and see like how many minutes that add up to hours, that add up to days, do we spend in the stands around our health that could actually be spent in the game. I mean, literally, I can think of hours and hours where it's like I'm just up in the stands rather than actually being at cause and in the game with my health. A lot of talk, not a lot of action. Consider all the hours you are in the stands of your health that could be used in the actual game. So we're going to cover the other part, and this is your spirituality or your spiritual well-being. This is I'd also call this section like where you find peace, like how you have like the peace in your life that has your life work. And we're not going to go into any details because it's going to look different for each of you. You might be completely agnostic or atheist, but spirituality is still a part of who you are and your way of being. Period. Like, there's just no argument around it. It has to do with how you get your peace. It has to do with how you become whole. And so even if you don't have a higher power or whatever, that doesn't matter. We're not talking about that. We're not going to go there here. We're just talking about your spirituality. And so now you cannot avoid this. You can't avoid your spirituality. Some of us have some really confusing ideas of what it looks like to be in the game when it comes to this, when it comes to your spirituality, when it comes to getting whole or having peace around this part of our life. And it's fascinating. The hours that add up to days, that add up to weeks, that likely add up to years where we are actually not in the game around this. So being in the game is not having, you might notice that this is something that you do. It's not having an intellectual debate with others or yourself around this. How often do we philosophize or we talk about things we just really don't know? We just don't know. And we spend hours in this conversation. Like, literally hours. And for what? To be right? To be heard? To be smart? To look good? And I would just ask, like, what does it actually do? Like, what are you actually up to? Are you actually in the game? Or are you just up in the stands? Like, can you see? You can almost see it now. Where it's like the difference between being in the game, right? The football game that's happening on the TV, being in that game versus being out here watching it with a bunch of your friends. You can hear the conversations that you have around this, can't you? You can see the things you do because it has no direct impact on your spirituality or your peace. But we think it's so crazy. We think it does. We think we're actually impacting it by talking about it. Like, again, me having this conversation about this is not me being in the game. It just isn't. Some might argue in some way it is, but it's not. It's not until I'm actually in the game around it. It would have you actually be in the game, guys. Like, the thing around your spirituality would actually have you be in the game around it. So what keeps us in the stands? So we're going to wrap things up here, and I want to just chat for a moment and have this conversation of what actually keeps you in the stands. Being in your head keeps you in the stands. This thing that we do, where we're like in here, like we're having this conversation in our head, like this back and forth debate that no one's even hearing or listening to, of being right or wrong or shoulds or shouldn'ts. Just being up there in general is being in the stands. It doesn't even have to be happening with someone else. If you're up in your head, you're in the stands. Talking about the game keeps you in the stands also. You ever notice we do that? It's like, well, once I've got the marketing, or if I had the marketing, or once I had the relationship, or if I had the relationship, or once I had the gym membership, or once I started working out, or once this thing starts happening. It's like, it's always this thing that we're doing where we're taking our past, throwing it up in our future. And guess where you're not in that very moment? You're not actually in the thing when you're doing that. Anytime you also have fear come up, that is an excellent indicator you are in the stands. Fear is like the greatest indicator, guys. And all the coaching I've done with people, if I can get someone to get that when you experience fear, that is a good indicator of the thing you get to look at, because you're not playing in the game. You're not playing in the game when you have the fear come up and you don't go into it. Like, you ever had that thing where you're talking about something, you're like, well, I really don't want to do this, or it's like there's this area of your life that's like sounds scary or whatever, and it's like you never go do it. And I always challenge people that that's actually the thing that's next for you, that you actually get to go get in the game around that thing and shine a light on it to actually see that the thing you were scared of wasn't that scary. Living life comfortably with nothing to lose has you in the stands of the game. So be in the game. Being in the games comes with fear because, like all games, there are two likely outcomes: winning or losing. Right? If you're in the game, it's like no wonder we don't like being in the game. I might lose, and losing would mean something. It'd mean I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I just never measure up, or whatever the thing is that you say about yourself. We all do, by the way. Don't think you're off the hook. You all do this. But it's the winning and losing part that keeps us out of the game. Because we love winning, but when there's a chance of losing, it's where we start to shut down. You may actually lose or fall flat on your face when you're in the game. In fact, if you have failed or recently had a crash of some type in the areas we've been talking about, it is more likely that you are actually in the game. And you would judge it like you're doing something wrong. That like something isn't working. I have people come up to me all the time and they're like, my life isn't working, Matt. I'm failing. I've got this thing around my business or my life or my relationship, and I'm falling flat on my face. And it's like, congratulations. Guess what? You're actually in the game of your life around that thing. You're just experiencing something that you're going to get a lesson from this thing. That in the next one, or in the next occurrence of it, or in relating to that person, your health, your money, relationships, whatever it is, you actually have a second chance to do it differently to win. And you might lose even again. And it might feel awful, but guess what? You're in the game. You're not in the stands. And it takes courage, doesn't it? Like some of you have fallen just flat on your face and it hurts and it's so painful. And it really takes courage to stand up again. It takes real courage to play in the game of life. Those that do it well know that it is just a game. It's just a game. And it can be played over and over and over. There's no losing. You're going to be okay. The masters of the game play it as often as they can. Failure means something radically different to them. You've read the books, you've heard the stories. Failure doesn't mean the failure that keeps people down from ever coming up again. People that play the game often, right? Look at people that play sports. Could you imagine if they just quit after they failed, they lost their first game? It's like they'd never play again. So many look forward to failure because to be in the game is more powerful than to be a spectator from the stands. It just feels better. Winning and losing feels better than being in the stands talking about it.